Yangyang, Yangmi, and more. The hidden impressions behind their names. A celebrity's name may look simple, but once it becomes attached to a familiar face, it can take on an entirely different meaning. That is the central idea behind a discussion examining the names of several Chinese entertainers, including Yangyang, Yangmi, Xiao Zhan, Li Qin, Zhou Ye, Meng Ziyi, and others. The conversation compares personal impressions with AI-generated interpretations, asking a surprisingly simple question. What would these names sound like if we heard them without knowing the celebrities behind them? The answer is not always what we might expect. Some names appear distinctive because of uncommon characters. Others sound ordinary because their characters have been widely used for generations. And in some cases, a name that seems completely ordinary can become unforgettable, simply because a famous actor has made it part of their public identity. Importantly, the opinions discussed here are interpretations rather than objective facts about the personalities of the celebrities. When a common name becomes famous, Yangyang is perhaps one of the clearest examples of how celebrity can transform the perception of a name. The name itself is described in the supplied discussion as very familiar and relatively ordinary. There is nothing especially complicated about its structure. Yet, for audiences who know the actor, hearing Yangyang immediately brings a particular person to mind. That raises an interesting point. Would the name feel equally distinctive if it belonged to someone nobody knew? Probably not. According to the AI interpretation presented in the discussion, Yangyang has a clean, concise, and slightly cool quality. It can suggest a calm and independent image without sounding excessively traditional. But there is another explanation for its strong impact. The celebrity himself has given the name a recognizable identity. Once a performer becomes widely known, their name stops functioning as just a combination of characters. It becomes associated with their appearance, career, performances, and public image. In that sense, the person can become more important than the name. This is also why describing a name as ordinary should not be confused with saying that the person is ordinary. A simple name can belong to a highly successful celebrity. Yang Mi and the power of an unusual character, Yang Mi, offers a different example. The discussion describes her surname as common. While the character used in her given name is presented as much less typical, that contrast creates a distinctive effect. When a familiar surname is paired with an unusual given name, the less common character can become the part that people remember. The speaker also makes an association between the character and mathematical notation, giving the name an intellectual or sharp feeling. The AI interpretation goes in a similar direction, describing the combination as modern, distinctive, and associated with a woman who appears to have a strong sense of individuality. That should remain in the category of interpretation. A name cannot prove that someone is intelligent, ambitious, or strong-minded. What it can do is create an impression in the listener's mind, and that impression can be powerful. For a celebrity, memorability matters. A distinctive name can make it easier for audiences to recognize a performer among many other names appearing across entertainment news and social media. However, unusual does not automatically mean better. A rare character may make a name memorable, but it can also create practical difficulties when people try to type or search for it. That issue becomes particularly interesting in the case of Meng Ziyi. Meng Ziyi and the problem of rare characters. The discussion points out that Meng Ziyi's name once involved a different form of a character, and that, according to the supplied material, she explained that the character was changed after becoming less convenient or less commonly supported for digital input. This is a reminder that names exist in a very different environment today. A name is no longer only written on paper. People type names into phones and computers. They search for celebrities online. Names appear in subtitles, databases, hashtags, and social media posts. A character can therefore be aesthetically appealing while simultaneously being inconvenient in everyday digital use. The speaker nevertheless views Meng Ziyi's name positively. The combination is described as carrying a classical and refined atmosphere. Some of the characters are perceived as having a traditionally masculine feeling, yet their combination in a woman's name creates an interesting contrast between strength and softness. The AI interpretation similarly describes the name as elegant and somewhat classical. This is an example of how a name can create an unusual impression without being complicated. Sometimes contrast is enough. Zhou Ye and the appeal of something different. Zhou Ye is another name that stands out in the discussion. The speaker describes the given name as less familiar, particularly in the context of female names. Rather than seeing that as a weakness, the speaker considers the two-character combination clean and memorable. The AI analysis emphasizes a similar quality. The name is described as having an unusual balance. A calm surname combined with a given name that feels simpler and less predictable. That slight unfamiliarity may actually help. When a person hears a name that follows a very common pattern, there may be nothing that encourages them to remember it. But when a name feels slightly unexpected, the listener may pay closer attention. This does not mean every unusual name will become memorable, but it does suggest that distinctiveness can influence first impressions. Xiao Zhan and the role of the surname Xiao Zhan is discussed from another angle. The speaker feels that the given name carries a traditionally masculine and somewhat familiar quality. However, the surname is described as less common, which changes the overall impression. The AI interpretation emphasizes contrast between the surname and given name, suggesting a combination that sounds strong and distinctive. Again, the analysis is about perceived atmosphere, not a factual description of Xiao Zhan's personality, but the example demonstrates something important. People rarely evaluate a given name in isolation. The surname can completely change how the full name feels. A common given name can become distinctive when paired with an unusual surname. Likewise, a common surname and common given name can create a much more familiar impression. That balance is one of the recurring themes throughout the discussion. Li Qin and the balance between familiarity and elegance. Li Qin provides another interesting example. The surname Li is described in the supplied material as extremely common, while Qin is perceived as less frequently encountered in personal names. The speaker associates the character with a clean, elegant, and refined feeling. The AI interpretation describes the full name as quiet, graceful, and somewhat classical. This combination creates an interesting balance. The surname makes the structure feel familiar, while the given name provides a more distinctive quality. It is almost the reverse of a name in which an unusual surname does most of the work. From the information provided, this suggests that uniqueness does not always have to come from the entire name. Sometimes a single element is enough to create a recognizable impression. When old-fashioned does not mean bad, several names discussed in the material are described as old-fashioned. That word can sound negative, but the discussion makes an important distinction. A name may feel old-fashioned simply because it was more popular during an earlier period. Naming trends change. Characters that were extremely popular in one generation may become less fashionable in another. A name that once sounded modern can eventually remind younger people of an older generation. That does not mean the original name was poorly chosen. In many families, names are connected to hopes for a child's future. Parents may choose characters associated with strength, intelligence, beauty, success, or good fortune. The emotional meaning of a name can therefore remain important, even if the style of the name becomes less fashionable over time. This is particularly relevant when discussing the actress whose earlier name, according to the supplied material, reflected her family's hope for a boy. She was reportedly the fourth child after 3 daughters, and the name she originally received reflected the family's desire for a son. Later, she used a different name. The speaker considers the current name much more elegant and feminine, particularly because of the final character. The AI interpretation similarly describes the current name as soft, refined, and graceful. The story illustrates how a name can preserve a piece of family history. It is not simply a label. Sometimes it reflects what parents wanted, what they expected, or what was happening inside a family at the time. Yangyang, Ziyi, and the difference between ordinary and unfashionable. The discussion becomes particularly entertaining when the speaker asks AI to compare several celebrity names with their own name. The goal is not a scientific test. It is essentially a playful experiment. Which name sounds the most ordinary, dated, or unfashionable? According to the supplied material, the AI's answer was unexpectedly harsh. The speaker's own name was ranked as the least fashionable among the names being compared. The AI reportedly explained its conclusion by pointing to 3 factors: the feeling of an older era, the image associated with the name, and a gap between traditional naming styles and contemporary tastes. Yangyang, by comparison, was described as very ordinary but not necessarily unattractive. Meng Ziyi was also discussed as a name with familiar elements and a certain generational feeling. Wu Lei was described as a male name carrying an older era impression, while another female name was associated with naming trends from previous decades. The important lesson here is not which name wins or loses. The more interesting point is how subjective these judgments are. Even AI can produce inconsistent answers. The discussion itself acknowledges that AI had given different evaluations of some names in earlier conversations. That means these rankings should not be treated as objective measurements. They are closer to a digital version of asking someone, "What does this name make you think of?" Why AI's opinion should be taken carefully. AI can be useful for exploring linguistic associations, but its interpretation is not proof of a person's character. If AI describes a name as intelligent, that does not establish that the celebrity is intelligent. If it calls a name elegant, that does not prove the person has an elegant personality. And if it describes a name as old-fashioned, that does not make the person old-fashioned. The supplied discussion actually becomes more interesting because it acknowledges this limitation. The speaker recognizes that AI can make mistakes and sometimes contradict itself. That is especially important when discussing names because the subject is highly subjective. Different generations may have completely different reactions to the same characters. Someone may hear an old-fashioned name and associate it with family members. Another person may hear the same name and think it sounds classic and elegant. Neither reaction is necessarily the universal truth. The bigger question, does a celebrity make the name? According to the information provided, this may be the most interesting question of all. When audiences hear a famous celebrity's name, are they really judging the name, or are they judging the celebrity they already associate with it? Yangyang is a strong example. The name may be common, but the actor has become so closely connected with it that the two are difficult to separate. The same principle can apply to Yang Mi, Xiao Zhan, Li Qin, and other well-known figures. Their names have accumulated meaning through their careers. That accumulated meaning can eventually become stronger than the literal meaning of the characters. This explains why a common name can become a powerful brand. A name does not need to be rare to become memorable. It needs recognition, and recognition often comes from the person who carries it. Final thoughts, based on the supplied information, the names discussed in this conversation reveal a fascinating mixture of tradition, popularity, personal taste, and celebrity branding. Some names stand out because they use less familiar characters. Some feel memorable because the combination is unusual. Others sound completely ordinary, but have become powerful because a famous actor has made the name recognizable. And some names may feel dated today, simply because naming fashions have changed. The most important distinction is between a name's impression and the reality of the person behind it. A name can suggest elegance, it can sound intelligent, it can feel traditional. It can seem modern, it can even remind someone of another generation. But none of those impressions proves anything about the personality of the celebrity who carries it. What is confirmed from the supplied material is that these names can produce very different reactions when examined separately from the celebrities themselves. What remains subjective is whether a particular name is beautiful, ordinary, memorable, or old-fashioned, and that may be exactly what makes the topic so interesting. Once a celebrity becomes famous, their name can stop being just a name, it becomes part of their identity. A familiar surname and a simple given name can become instantly recognizable. A rare character can become a signature. A once common name can become associated with an entire generation of entertainment. And perhaps the biggest surprise is that the name does not necessarily create the celebrity. Sometimes, the celebrity creates the meaning of the name.